You know that feeling when your friend texts you we need to talk, and you spend the next 3 hours convinced your life is over, only to find out they just want to borrow your lawnmower? Well, Prime Minister Mark Carney just had the political equivalent of that conversation with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, except instead of a lawnmower, we're talking about billions of dollars in tariffs, the future of Canadian industries, and Carney's bold claim that Canada is somehow going to walk away from this mess with an even better deal than we had before. Yeah, you heard that right. While Canadian steel workers are losing jobs and our economy is getting hammered harder than a nail at a Tim Hortons construction site, our Prime Minister is in question period talking like he just negotiated the deal of the century. So grab your skepticism and maybe a stress ball, because we're diving into Carney's latest diplomatic adventure and whether his optimism is justified or if we're all just witnessing the political equivalent of this is fine while everything burns around us. Let's start with what actually happened, because the details here are wild. Carney flew down to Washington, walked into the Oval Office, sat across from Donald Trump, and had what he's calling a meeting of the minds. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone describes a conversation with Trump as a meeting of the minds, I need to know which minds we're talking about. Are we talking strategic minds? Business minds? Or are we talking about two people who just really bonded over their mutual appreciation for bold negotiating tactics and executive power? Because context matters here, folks. The backdrop for this meeting is about as cheerful as a January morning in Winnipeg. Trump slapped tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and a whole bunch of other sectors, and our economy has been bleeding jobs like a hockey player bleeds teeth. Thousands of manufacturing jobs gone. Steel and aluminum exports have dropped faster than Canadian enthusiasm for winter by February. Industries are panicking, workers are worried, and the opposition is absolutely roasting Carney in question period, demanding to know what exactly he accomplished besides a handshake and a photo op. And Carney's response? Basically, trust me, bro. He stands up in Parliament and declares that Canada already has the best deal with the Americans because most products are still flowing tariff-free despite Trump's trade war theatrics. Which is technically true, but it's kind of like saying you're having a great day because you only got punched in the face once instead of twice. Sure, it could be worse, but maybe we should address the whole getting punched in the face situation? But here's where Carney goes full confidence mode. He doesn't just say we have a good deal, he says we're going to get an even better deal. Not just maintaining what we have. Not just stopping the bleeding. Better. As in, superior to what we had before Trump decided to use tariffs like they're going out of style. Now that's either brilliance, delusion, or the kind of negotiating bravado that makes your poker buddies nervous. So what's actually on the table here? According to Carney, Canadian and American officials are currently negotiating terms on deals covering steel, aluminum, and energy sectors. They're also working on what he calls the modalities of an auto agreement, which is government speak for we're trying to figure out how to make this work without anyone losing their minds. And then there's the forestry sector, specifically softwood lumber, which has been a thorn in Canada-US relations longer than most of us have been alive. Carney says Canada will only accept the best deal on softwood lumber, which sounds great until you remember we've been saying that for decades while getting absolutely nowhere. Let's talk about what Carney didn't bring home from Washington, because sometimes what's missing is more interesting than what's there. He came back without a deal. No signed agreement. No concrete announcements. Nothing you could actually point to and say this is what we achieved. Instead, we got promises, pathways, and the political equivalent of it's in the works. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc didn't even fly back with Carney, he stayed in Washington to hammer out details, which either means they're on the verge of something significant or LeBlanc drew the short straw and has to keep negotiating while Carney faces the firing squad in question period. Now, Carney described his conversation with Trump as granular, which is fascinating because Trump is not exactly known for granular discussions. The man tweets in all caps and speaks in superlatives. Everything is the best, the worst, tremendous, or a disaster. The idea of Trump getting into the weeds on trade policy technicalities is like imagining a bull doing origami in a china shop. But maybe that's what happened. Maybe Trump channeled his inner policy wonk and they actually had a detailed conversation about tariff schedules and sectoral agreements. Or maybe Carney is putting diplomatic lipstick on a pig and the conversation was exactly as chaotic as we'd imagine. Here's where things get really interesting though. Carney explicitly said that not all trading relations will be governed by CUSMA moving forward. That's the Canada-US-Mexico agreement, the trade deal that replaced NAFTA and was supposed to provide stability and predictability to North American trade. But Carney is now saying we're looking at bilateral deals, just Canada and the US, cutting Mexico out of certain arrangements. That's a massive shift in strategy, and it's either genius or it's throwing our southern neighbor under the bus to save our own skin. Mexico is watching this very carefully, probably wondering if Canada just became the friend who ditches you when a cooler crowd shows up. The billion-dollar question, literally, is whether Carney's optimism is grounded in reality or if he's selling snake oil to a worried nation. The opposition certainly thinks it's the latter. They're hammering him in question period, demanding specifics, asking what concrete gains he secured, pointing out that jobs are still disappearing while he's talking about future deals and pathways to progress. And honestly, they're not wrong to be skeptical. Politicians have a long history of declaring victory while the battle is still raging, and Canadians have learned to be cautious when leaders tell us everything is fine. But let's give Carney some credit here. Negotiating with Trump is like playing chess with someone who might flip the board at any moment. Trump is unpredictable, transactional, and willing to use tariffs as weapons in ways that previous presidents never did. The fact that Carney got a meeting at all, had what sounds like a substantive conversation, and left with negotiations ongoing rather than completely dead in the water might actually be an achievement. The bar is low, sure, but clearing a low bar is still better than tripping over it. The strategy here seems to be sector-by-sector negotiations rather than one comprehensive deal. Steel and aluminum first, then energy, then autos, then lumber. It's like eating an elephant one bite at a time, except the elephant is a trade war and each bite could still choke you. This approach has advantages. It allows for progress in areas where agreement is easier while continuing to negotiate tougher sectors. But it also has risks. Each sector might get a deal that works for them but creates problems elsewhere. And there's always the chance that Trump changes his mind, decides he's not getting enough, and slaps on new tariffs just because it's Tuesday. The auto sector is particularly tricky. Canada's automotive industry is deeply integrated with the American market. Parts cross the border multiple times during manufacturing. A single vehicle might contain components from 6 different facilities in 3 different countries. Trying to untangle that and create a bilateral deal that works for everyone is like trying to separate mixed paint back into individual colors. It's theoretically possible but practically a nightmare. And the workers in Windsor and Oshawa are watching this very carefully because their livelihoods depend on getting this right. And then there's softwood lumber, the trade dispute that refuses to die. We've been arguing with the Americans about lumber for so long that there are probably trade lawyers who've built entire careers on this one issue. The Americans claim we subsidize our lumber industry unfairly. We say we're just managing our resources effectively. They impose duties. We challenge them. Panels rule in our favor. They ignore the rulings. Rinse and repeat for 40 years. Carney saying we'll only accept the best deal on lumber is admirable, but forgive us for being skeptical that this time will be different. What's fascinating about Carney's approach is the sheer confidence. This is a man who walked into the Prime Minister's office from the world of central banking, inherited a trade war, and is now negotiating like he wrote the book on international commerce. Which, to be fair, he kind of did during his time at the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. The guy understands economics and finance at a level most politicians can only dream about. But understanding economics and successfully negotiating with Donald Trump are 2 very different skill sets. It's the difference between knowing how a car works and actually winning a street race. The question Canadians are asking is simple: should we believe him? Is this optimism based on real progress behind closed doors, or is this political theater designed to calm markets and voters while the actual situation is far more precarious? We won't know until a deal is actually signed, ratified, and implemented. Until then, we're all just watching this unfold, hoping that Carney's confidence is justified and not just the political equivalent of fake it till you make it. So here we are. Canada and the US are negotiating. Carney says we're getting a better deal. The opposition says show us the money. Workers in affected industries are nervously checking job security. And Trump is probably tweeting about something completely unrelated while his trade team handles the details. It's Canadian politics meets American unpredictability, with billions of dollars and thousands of jobs hanging in the balance. Will Carney deliver on his promise of an even better deal? Is this negotiating brilliance or is he writing checks his diplomacy can't cash? Only time will tell, and trust me, we'll be here covering every development because this story has more twists than a politician's explanation for why they broke a campaign promise. If you want to stay on top of Canadian politics without falling asleep, hit that subscribe button because Canadian Insights is pumping out content faster than Carney pumps out optimistic soundbites. Like this video if you appreciate political analysis that doesn't sugarcoat reality, and drop a comment telling us what you think. Is Carney a negotiating genius or are we being sold a bill of goods? Let's talk about it. Until next time, stay informed, stay critical, and remember that in politics, promises are cheap but results are priceless.